Welcome to Behind the Research, a podcast that will focus on the realities of stalking with first-hand accounts from victim survivors. I am your host, Karen Fullerton-Chalmers, and this series will focus on my doctoral research. Together, we'll explore the representation of stalking within film and television, as well as interviews with research participants to hear more about their stories and how these helped shape my findings. Caution is advised, as some content may be sensitive to listeners. Pseudonyms have also been used to protect participant identities. On this episode of Behind the Research, we welcome Laura. Laura was stalked by her ex-partner, who she was in a relationship with for a year. Before the relationship ended, Laura could see signs of coercion, and with the ending of the relationship, her ex stalked her to continue to hold power and control. Her ex-partner used cyber elements such as social media and emails to contact her. He would claim false victimisation to her friends and family, and even made false allegations to services such as social work and her employer to punish Laura. Her stalker didn't stop there though. He would follow her to her workplace as he knew her routine and often showed up at her residence. One time he even climbed over her 6-foot garden gate to threaten her and her family. Through Laura's bravery, she compiled evidence and was commended for her organisation of this, which eventually led to her stalker's convictions. Laura, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hello, and thank you for having me. Thank you.
So the last time we spoke was around about a year ago. And at that point, you mentioned that you had stopped being targeted by your stalker. But I remember a few months after that, you then texted me and said that unfortunately this cycle had started again and he showed up at your workplace. What's happened since then?
That was in February of 2022. He was, it's like a public road just up from where I work. And he was coming, when I was coming out my work or starting my work in the morning, but it was at sporadic times and sporadic days. I managed to, because I was aware of it, he didn't see me, but I saw him. I took a video recording and I phoned the police. Which I then gave to the police, which has obviously got the time and the date on it, live video, and you can see him stopping and looking back to see if he could see me. The police had all this, and I got an incident number, and they just said that they'll keep an eye out. But then this started to disappear. It was, it went through a wee stage and then it didn't come to anything, luckily enough. But I was one step ahead because I've also been through it all. So I knew exactly how to navigate myself. So I knew that the next time that was a video recording, I knew the next time for another bit of evidence would be maybe pictorial, just a picture. Or a bit audio, because there's the different bits of evidence. So yeah, I knew what to do, and I was keeping myself safe.
And you mentioned there about your knowledge, sadly, which you've gained through collecting evidence in this case, and you were commended for it, as I mentioned in the introduction. And we know how important it is to collect evidence, especially in crimes of stalking, and sometimes the onus is on the victim, unfortunately, to do that. But what sort of advice would you give to others who are in a similar situation to yourself?
Well, I would say, as these perpetrators of this crime, they exert influence and power and control over their victims. They'll try and utilise technology to cyberstalk, whether it be using texts, unwanted emails, calls, or false aliases, maybe through Facebook. I would say for anybody that continues to use maybe social media, because you don't want to cut that off, you don't want to isolate yourself. You will get some police officers that might say, come off Facebook, but that's what the perpetrator wants. I would say keep your communication lines going at all times. Tell family, tell friends, make your profiles private. Watch that you're not if you're out somewhere in public, don't post at that point when you're there. Maybe take photographs and do it when you're home and you're back in your own house. I would say for collating evidence, this is paramount. Because I've been down the justice system twice due to my perpetrator, I was very well equipped. I collated 2 folders of evidence. This was a pictorial forum, written forum, emails, 6 different Facebook aliases, false aliases. yeah. And I collated all this, and it's got the dates and the times. I would say just be well aware, be very careful, don't be complacent, just be vigilant, and just keep the communication going. It is an insidious crime, and it's one of the most difficult crimes to convict in the court of law. And I wouldn't want to worry any viewers. It is a trauma, to go through it is a trauma. I've been through it myself. But then you've got the added bit of having to go through the court system, which can be quite ruthless, because, you know, for both sides of they've got to be ruthless, as any crime. But I feel that if you're well equipped, you've got your evidence, then, you know, that's half the battle.
Yeah, and I think that's really important, what you're saying there, that it's hard to be prepared for something like this. But with advice that you've given, I'm sure many people can take that away with them, because a lot of people might not know how to collect evidence. And again, based on what Laura's said there, if you keep a diary, you keep a journal, you put in the date, the time, what they were wearing, if you were with anybody at the time, because they can be used as a witness, and most importantly, what you felt at the time. The impact to you as a victim is extremely important when it comes to these things. So that's something to include as well, which a lot of people sometimes don't think about. You always know I like to change tack slightly and ask quite random things. We've did this a few times, me and you, so you know me well at this point. But when we spoke about 12 months ago, it was round about my research about film and television's representation of stalking and what that looked like to victims, how victims were impacted by that. And yourself, along with a few others, went against the grain of what people might think someone who's experienced this would feel. So, for example, a lot of people would say or believe that, and rightfully so, if you're traumatized, then you might avoid these types of materials. And that was a belief I had until I started this research, and you said, well, no, I actually sought out these materials because I wanted to understand this behaviour, because people don't talk about it enough. So you had to go out, Google it and educate yourself. So can you tell us a little more about that?
Yeah, myself personally, I feel the representation of stalking within film and television here in the UK, I would say can be fairly poor. I feel there's not enough true life stories here in the UK opposed to America and the United States. I have watched Strictly Stalking, which is on YouTube, and you know, there's a lot of diverse stories, you know, some quite grueling ones, but then they also hit upon the different typologies of stalking, because it's not always you know, the ex-partner, which is that's your intimate stalker, which is obviously what me personally, what I was subjected to. You also have the resentful stalker, the intimate stalker, and there's I think there was for what I've read up and researched, there's five different typologies, which is quite interesting. A lot of it is, I know that none of us could diagnose narcissism, but narcissism and stalking is that usually, you know, with stalking, usually the majority of stalkers have the narcissistic traits. More, you know, that's high up there. With entitlement, the grandiose sort of, you know, the victim blaming, which is, you know, these all come under the umbrella. And I just feel that the one that I was saying about in America, that is really, really good because it hits upon all these. The ones that I have watched was Intimate Stalker, and it was a Donnelly Stalker. It's on YouTube, and it's a fantasy. It's more sort of because it's an Intimate Stalker. It's more based on the more it's more fantasist infatuation. Therefore, mainly this will be done indirect because they don't want to be, because it's a fantasy. They don't want to be found out. And watched the Donnelly Stalker. That was quite, that was quite interesting. And that was a lady. It was a female. So it was good to see that it's not always males. This could be females as well. So that gives you a different, a different curveball to it. I also found Holly Duthart. I found her documentary very interesting as well. How her families pulled together the Holly Duthart Trust, and there's an app for victims that they could put on their phone. So it's for the keep them safe. So I think that's a really, really good thing that her family's pulled together in her memory. I think that's good. I just feel that, you know, there should be more within the UK for awareness.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point. And in the show notes of this podcast, I will add links to some of the things that Laura's mentioned. Strictly Stalking is one podcast that I also listen to. If you're traumatised by stalking, then of course we would agree that don't go and actively seek these things. But some people, like Laura's mentioned in her mindset, she wanted to know, whether that be out of curiosity or whether that want to be understanding so that your conviction could take place, I suppose.
Putting upon watching about the narcissism and the stalking, I also, when it was coming up to the trials, I also watched like trials on YouTube as well, just to give me that sort of familiar, to make me familiar with the court process. Like special measures getting put in place, and just so that I was equipped. I wanted to be ready for everything because I wasn't going to let them beat me. I'd come that far, and I was going to go all the way.
And again, I think that's good advice, because this can be, some people who have experienced this might never have been in this situation where they're going into a court and this is their first time. I know that Victim Support Scotland do have walkthrough videos of the court so that you can go and kind of get an idea of what it is. So again, I'll link that in the show notes. Plenty of show notes stuff going on. Thanks for that, Laura. So I'll link that so that people again can see the work that they do as well. So we've spoke before as I've mentioned. We keep in touch a lot of the time about different things, which is always very nice. But is there any other key messages that you want to leave listeners with? But also, why did you want to come on the podcast today?
Well, first of all, I would say, which is the pinnacle, is you keep communicating with your family and friends, or somebody that you could trust. Really, make people aware of what's happening. Document. Like I said, keep a journal. When reporting any incidents to the police, you make sure you get an incident card. This will have a crime number, and it will also have the officer's shoulder numbers. This is then good for easier reference for yourself. It's easier then just to go back. You've got all that there in place. I would also say install a door camera and outside lighting to keep yourself and occupants of your home safe and just to keep yourself safe and secure. Also, when out and about, carry a handheld alarm. These could be bought online. You could get them through the police would give them as well. When outside, always make sure your keys are in your hand when you're coming to your house. You just make sure everything's accessible for yourself. Um, I would just say always talk, always document, and always report if there's anything. It might not seem anything, but these perpetrators they're very manipulative and they'll use underhand tactics enough to let you know that they are watching you, but enough for them to try and get away with it from the police. So they're very manipulative, they're very calculating. So it's like cat and mouse, like coercive control. They want to be one step ahead. So I mean, at one point I felt like the FBI. I felt, I just, because I'm having then to watch what he was doing. So I was having to collate all this information and report it, document, blah, blah, blah. And yeah, it's very mentally tiring. But yeah, you just got to keep on going and just keep safe. As far as coming on the show, like I said, Karen, I just feel that there's not enough awareness. This is a crime where the crime convictions in the court are very low, and not everyone, it comes away with a conviction. I was fortunate that I had hard evidence of written, pictorial, everything was there. I had witnesses, and I had I think in myself, I had the drive in myself as well that he wasn't going to beat me. Because that's what they want. They're bullies. They're bullies. You've just got to keep on going, I think. And I know that's hard when you're actually going through it. It's very hard because it's very draining. It's very mentally, impacting mentally. But yeah, and I think you've got to keep yourself busy, self-care, put your music on, go out for a walk, surround yourself with your loved ones, your friends, keep fit, whatever you need to do, just to keep yourself focused. Yeah, I just feel that there's not enough awareness, and I would like that brought into effect as well. I would also like there to be a register. There's a register for paedophiles, and they're repeat offenders. My perpetrator was a repeat offender, and I feel that no community service is going to be enough rehabilitation for them to see where they've went wrong. They will victim blame. They'll try anything to make themselves look good and you to be the bad one. I just feel no community service, no fines. I don't feel that jail itself is on its own is not that great because I feel rehabilitation to see where and why they're doing it, and it's in here, for them to be sort of fixed so that they don't do it again. And I think there should be a register for repeat offenders that they get that on their record, just like a sex offender would. And there's not one in place. And I think that's one that should be in effect.
The key takeaway, I suppose, from what you said there is around about how prevention is key, about trying to understand why someone would commit an act like this, and through that you then reduce victimisation. And also what you're saying about keep going if you can, just keep pushing and keep keep trying and keep surround yourself with loved ones, listen to your music, go to the gym, whatever self-care looks like, and don't isolate yourself. Make sure you're surrounded by people, which I think is just so important. And one thing I should say is that, again, in the show notes, I'll list some services that people can reach out to if they've been affected by this, or if they know someone who's also been affected by this, because it's really important that people know where to go to.
Yeah, I feel like, well, there's, you've got your Women's Aid, you've got your VIA, you've got victim support. You know, they will help you. That's what they're there for. They did help me during the court process. And that actually came into the court when I was in the stands. And doing when I was actually getting cross-examined from the defence barrister, I had the ladies in from the victim support, and they were like, so everybody pulls together. But yeah, it's knowing how to reach out to get the support.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good message to end on, about pulling together and being there for each other and supporting each other. So on that note, Laura, thank you so much for joining us today. It's always a pleasure, might be the wrong word, but it's always very engaging. It's always very interesting listening to you. So I really appreciate you taking the time being here.
Right, thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to Behind the Research. You can follow my research journey on LinkedIn and X at Karen Fullerton C. Special thanks to all research participants for taking part in my thesis and entrusting me with their story. And thanks to the Scottish Graduate School of Social Science and the University of the West of Scotland.